Coming up next on the Kiro Weekend News, a deceptively dangerous fire today in Renton. It started slowly, but blew big just as firefighters began to attack.
In Poland, some of the worst violence in 7 years as workers try to celebrate May Day. And neither wind nor rain nor sleet could keep them from their appointed rounds. No, these aren't postal workers, but crop walkers. We'll tell you who they are and why they brave the elements.
And before you set out your Monday clothes, you'll want to hear the forecast from John Collins.
And Tim Healy with sports of the Supersonic variety next on the Kiro Weekend News.
Kiro TV, your Sonic station. Now, Brian Wood and Monica Hart, Tim Healy Sports, and John Collins Weather. From the newsroom in Seattle, this is Kiro Weekend News Update.
Good evening. Tonight, fire investigators say a careless smoker sparked a blaze that roared through a Renton warehouse this morning, doing an estimated $350,000 in damage. No one was seriously hurt in the blaze, but it was an especially dangerous and tricky fire to fight, as Mark Sauter reports.
Renton firefighters approached the fire with confidence, but the oily smoke oozing from the warehouse hinted of danger. Firefighters started work inside and on top of the building, which includes part of B&B Auto Parts and 3 stores. But they pulled back as the fire surged, fed by oil and rubber inside. Some firefighters on the roof apparently didn't get the message to retreat, so a colleague rushed up the ladder to warn them. His breathing apparatus seemed to fail in the thick smoke, but he was okay, and his message was clear and intense. The other firefighters understood. They all got off the roof. More than 50 firefighters continued the battle at ground level. They smashed and sawed at the front of the warehouse to get at the blaze. The plan worked, and the fire roared. Finally, after an hour and a half, and with the help of a Boeing foam truck from nearby Renton Airport, the fire was subdued, and the investigation begun. An employee apparently ignited the blaze while smoking in the warehouse.
He had some minor facial burns. He attempted to put the fire out himself and just couldn't do it, and then he had to vacate the building.
The man was treated and released at a local hospital. B&B Auto Parts stores inventory for at least 6 outlets here, inventory worth about $100,000 before the fire. Now the inventory is destroyed, and the warehouse may be damaged beyond repair.
Well, we've got a little cleanup, I guess, ahead of us.
A tough job for Newman. He just recently finished the long task of fixing up and stocking the warehouse. In Renton, Mark Sauter, Kiro News.
Tonight, Tacoma police are investigating the possible kidnapping of an elderly woman. Police went to the woman's South Tacoma home early this morning after relatives found her house burglarized and the woman missing. The woman's car is also gone. Detectives are asking for help in locating it. It's a white 66 Chevy Malibu two-door with a license plate LFJ578. If you see the car, you're asked to report it to the police.
No flight delays are expected Monday because of inspections ordered on older model 737s. America West flies 17 of the jets on the West Coast, some through SeaTac. But the airline expects to complete the required inspections by close of business today. Yesterday, the FAA ordered 66 737s inspected for structural defects. That order follows Thursday's crash landing of an Aloha Airlines 737. Investigators continue to probe the wreckage on Maui, focusing on metal fatigue or failure as the possible cause of an explosion that blew a hole in the jet. Just last fall, the FAA ordered airlines to inspect the upper skin of nearly 300 737s, some in service for close to 20 years. Results of this weekend's emergency inspections probably won't be known until later this week. No matter what, aviation expert John Nance says this shouldn't hurt Boeing's reputation.
What this says to me about Boeing is that even when the airplanes that they build may be used enough to where, if this was a structural failure, to where a structural failure occurs, they're still strong enough to be able to come home with almost nothing left. That is unbelievable, and that says a lot of very good things about the company. As far as this particular problem impacting Boeing, no, I don't think it does.
Until the 66 737s are inspected, they cannot fly at altitudes higher than 23,000 feet. A sightseeing trip in the skies above New York City ended in a fatal crash today. A helicopter on a sightseeing tour with 5 people aboard crashed into the East River. 4 of the passengers were rescued, but one, a man from Japan, became tangled in his seatbelt and drowned. The cause of the accident is under investigation tonight.
Tomorrow morning, the Coast Guard will give another once-over to a Japanese tanker that ran aground in the Strait of Juan de Fuca last week. The damaged Matsukaze managed to limp to Port Angeles after being refloated on Friday. Hull inspections show holes in the ballast tanks and rudder problems. The crew wanted to take the tanker to Portland for repairs, but the Coast Guard says it is not seaworthy. So now it looks as though the tanker will go to dry dock in the Puget Sound area for repairs sometime later this week.
Closing arguments begin tomorrow in the cyanide poisoning case against Stella Nickel. The Auburn woman is accused of lacing Excedrin capsules with cyanide, killing her husband and another woman. The prosecutor's key witness is Nickel's own daughter. Cindy Hamilton testified last week that her mother planned to kill Bruce Nickel because she was getting tired of him. Stella Nickel denies that and denied prosecutors' accusations that she murdered for insurance money. This is the nation's first death by product tampering trial, and Nickel could face life in prison. The case could go to the jury as early as tomorrow afternoon. Coming up, in America, the 1st of May often goes by unnoticed.
But in Poland, the holiday has a much deeper meaning, made even more dramatic because workers must fight to celebrate the day. May Day in Poland, coming up next. In Poland today, some of the worst fighting since martial law was declared back in 1981. The violence came as members of Solidarity tried to celebrate May Day, a holiday for workers. Bert Quint has our report tonight.
Held their own May Day parade on the grounds of the huge industrial complex they've occupied since last Tuesday. Some are members of the new official unions the government set up after it outlawed Solidarity, but most vow allegiance to the old union, and they shouted its name today along with the demand, bread and freedom. Their women greeted them at the mill gate with hugs and kisses, with food and cheers. This man, Andrzej Szewczuk, who could be tomorrow's Lech Wałęsa, is their leader. He says, "We are tired, but we're still here, and we will stay." The part the church is playing here, as it did in Gdansk during the strikes of 1980 that gave birth to Solidarity, is evident in these pictures taken by camera smuggled into the mill. 2 priests were smuggled in as well and celebrated Mass for the strikers. These have been grim days inside the plant, eating a little, sleeping a little, and holding meetings. In Warsaw today, Solidarity activists pledged their support of the strikers. Police allowed them to gather in front of a church, but moved in quickly when the protesters tried to march. Both sides had urged restraint, but secret police in the crowd forced a conflict, grabbing demonstrators, women as well as men, beating them and dragging them into the ranks of uniformed officers. Some demonstrators fought back. One, an elderly man who it turned out could hardly walk without his cane. For the regime holding its celebration a few miles away, it was a bitter May Day. Here in the communist world, where the worker is supposed to be king, Polish authorities were threatening to put down the steel mill strike with force if the workers don't give in. Party chief Jaruzelski accused both Solidarity and some members of the economic establishment of blocking the path to Polish perestroika. The Polish leader vowed there'll be no return to the anarchy of the years of Solidarity and no turning back from reform. But the way things are beginning to look, it's a tough vow to keep. Bert Quint, CBS News, Warsaw.
In this country, time is running out for illegal aliens who want to become legal. The federal government's Amnesty program expires midnight Wednesday. In Texas today, the deadline created long lines. Immigrants trying to qualify for legal status. Nationwide so far, nearly 2 million people have applied. No lines, though, in the Seattle immigration office today, but there was a line of protesters outside. These critics of the amnesty plan complain Wednesday's deadline comes too soon for many who may qualify and leaves those who don't no way to support themselves. Congress passed the amnesty law 2 years ago. The deadline, just 3 days away.
Tuesday is presidential primary day in Ohio, and the latest polls show Massachusetts Governor Michael Dukakis with a 3-to-1 lead over his Democratic opponent, Jesse Jackson. But on the campaign trail today, Dukakis shrugged off his favorable standings. He told voters he was taking nothing for granted and to ignore the polls. Jesse Jackson, meanwhile, says he, too, isn't paying any attention to the polls and vowed to continue his campaign past Tuesday's elections and through to June, the end of primary season. You may have heard about a new report coming out by the Surgeon General saying cigarette smoking is addictive. Some people, especially smokers and former smokers, may say, so what else is new? Well, health officials claim this report is important, very important. They say a high-level report such as this will force society to look at tobacco differently.
Why do we allow free samples of the product to be sent through the mail or to be passed out on public property where kids and others have free access to them? When we call this drug an addicting drug, we have to take it more seriously than we currently do. We have to at least give it the serious attention that we do for the illicit drugs, such as heroin, cocaine, etc.
Davis also says cigarettes, like other addictive drugs, should not be sold in vending machines. Does a pill to cure morning sickness cause birth defects? This week in Tacoma, attorneys for 2 Washington state families will try to prove that it does. This isn't the first trial for Dow Chemical and its drug Benedictine, and it probably won't be the last. And as in previous trials, it will be a battle of the experts. The families claiming studies prove Benedictine's at fault, the company claiming otherwise.
Time to talk sports with Tim Healy, and it's a Supersonics stomp.
One of the best games I have ever seen the Sonics play, Brian, in Denver. They're back in Seattle, back home with the home court advantage in hand. Highlights and reaction from the Sonics' big playoff win coming up next.